Space is beautiful. It is vast and full of wonder. We see pictures of astronauts floating, smiling, and looking at Earth. They are our heroes, exploring places we can only dream of. We imagine the excitement of launching into the sky, leaving our world behind to touch the stars. It feels like a grand adventure, a story from a movie where everything ends well. But space is also dangerous. It is an unforgiving place, a vacuum where a tiny mistake can have enormous consequences. Behind the inspiring images and successful missions, there is a serious and unspoken reality that we must face. What happens if an astronaut doesn't come home? Talking about death is never easy. It is a topic we often avoid in our daily lives. So talking about death in space feels even more uncomfortable. It brings a dark cloud over the bright dream of exploration. We want to believe that our brave astronauts are invincible, that they will always be safe. But the history of space travel, from the Apollo 1 tragedy to the Challenger and Columbia disasters, reminds us that the risks are very real. For every triumphant step, there is a shadow of what could go wrong. Acknowledging this possibility is not about being negative, it is about being responsible and prepared for every outcome. For the astronauts themselves, understanding the protocols for death is a crucial part of their preparation. They are highly trained professionals who know the dangers of their job better than anyone. They accept these risks to push the boundaries of human knowledge. Knowing that a plan exists for the worst-case scenario provides a strange kind of comfort. It means that even in death, they will be treated with dignity and respect. It assures them that their crewmates will know exactly what to do, preventing panic and confusion during an already difficult and stressful time on a mission far from home. This conversation is also incredibly important for the families left behind on Earth. Imagine your loved one is millions of miles away, on a mission to Mars. The thought of them not returning is a heavy burden. Having a clear plan from an organization like NASA offers a measure of solace. It tells families that their loved ones' final moments and remains will be handled with care and honor. It answers some of the hardest questions they might have, providing a framework for grief and closure in a situation that is almost impossible for most of us to even comprehend. It is a promise of respect. NASA's primary goal is always the safety and success of its missions. Every piece of equipment is tested and every procedure is practiced over and over again. The goal is to prevent any loss of life. However, hope is not a strategy. As missions become longer and venture farther from Earth, like the planned journeys to Mars, the statistical probability of a medical emergency, or even death, increases. Therefore, NASA has a solemn duty to plan for this eventuality. It is a part of mission planning that is not publicized, but it is essential. This planning ensures the safety of the remaining crew and the integrity of the mission itself. The protocols for handling a death in space are complex and must consider many factors. The first priority is the well-being of the surviving crew members. A death on board a small spacecraft is not just a personal tragedy, it is also a potential psychological and logistical crisis. The crew must be able to continue their work and safely operate the vehicle. NASA's procedures are designed to provide clear step-by-step instructions to manage the situation calmly and effectively. This includes guidelines for securing the deceased astronaut's body in a way that is respectful and does not interfere with the continued operation of the spacecraft or its delicate systems. Respect for the deceased is a cornerstone of these plans. NASA is a global organization, working with astronauts from many different countries and cultural backgrounds. Each culture has its own traditions and beliefs about death and how the body should be treated. NASA's guidelines aim to be sensitive to this diversity. Where possible, the crew would be instructed to follow any known wishes of the deceased astronaut. This might involve a small private ceremony or specific handling procedures. It is about honoring the individual's life and legacy, even in the most remote and challenging environment imaginable, so far from everything they have ever known. Currently, for a mission on the International Space Station, the plan is relatively straightforward, though still grim. If an astronaut were to die, the crew would use a body bag and store the remains in a cold private area of the station. The body would then be returned to Earth on the next available return capsule, such as a SpaceX Dragon, usually within a matter of hours or days. This allows the family to have a proper burial, but this plan only works because the International Space Station is in low Earth orbit, relatively close to home. For future missions to the Moon or Mars, returning a body quickly will simply not be an option. Handling a deceased body in microgravity presents a unique and difficult set of challenges. On Earth, we have established procedures, but none of them apply in space. The absence of gravity means an unsecured body would float, posing a risk to the crew and the sensitive equipment inside the spacecraft. Therefore, the first step is to secure the remains. The crew would have to place the body in a specialized bag and anchor it securely to a fixed point inside the vehicle. This is a delicate and emotionally taxing task for the crewmates who are also grieving the loss of a friend and colleague in a very confined space. The issue of preservation is another major hurdle. On a long-duration mission like a 3-year round trip to Mars, decomposition becomes a serious concern. A spacecraft is a closed environment, and any biological breakdown could release gases and microbes that could be harmful to the health of the surviving crew. Freezing the body is the most logical option, but spacecraft do not have morgues or large freezers. The body would likely be stored in the coldest part of the ship, perhaps on the exterior, but this raises its own set of technical and ethical questions about how to manage such a situation with dignity. One proposed solution, developed by the company Promessa in collaboration with NASA, is a concept called the body back. This system involves placing the body in a robotic airtight bag. The bag would be exposed to the freezing temperatures of space, causing the body to freeze solid. Then, a robotic arm would vibrate the bag, shattering the frozen remains into a fine powder. This process, known as promession, would reduce the remains to a small, manageable volume of sterile ash that could be easily stored for the remainder of the mission. It is a practical, if unsettling, solution to a very difficult problem. Of course, the psychological toll on the crew cannot be overstated. Living and working alongside the remains of a deceased crewmate for months or even years would be incredibly stressful. The astronauts would need significant psychological support from mission control on Earth. They would have to cope with their grief while continuing to perform complex and demanding tasks. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of all, how to help the living continue on after a tragedy has occurred millions of miles from any help, support, or comfort from their loved ones back on our home planet. The challenges multiply when we consider what might happen if an astronaut dies on the surface of another world, like Mars. The dream is to see human footprints on the red planet, but we must also plan for the possibility of a human grave. If an astronaut dies during a Mars mission, returning the body to Earth would be almost impossible. A return trip would take many months, and the rocket needed to launch from Mars back to Earth would not have the capacity to carry the extra weight of a body bag. The crew would likely be faced with a difficult choice: burial on Mars. The idea of a Martian burial raises a host of ethical and planetary protection issues. Would we introduce Earth microbes to the Martian environment by burying a human body? This is a serious concern for scientists searching for signs of native Martian life. Contaminating the planet with Earth organisms could compromise decades of scientific research. Therefore, a Martian burial would likely require the body to be cremated first to sterilize the remains. This would require a portable crematorium, another piece of equipment that would need to be designed, built, and transported all the way to Mars. If cremation is not an option, the body might be sealed in a specialized body bag and buried in the Martian soil. The crew would have to choose a site and perform a burial, creating the first human cemetery on another planet. This would be a profoundly moving and historic moment, but also a deeply sad one. How would they mark the grave? What kind of ceremony would they hold? These are questions that NASA and its international partners are contemplating as they plan for humanity's future as a multiplanetary species. The final resting place for an explorer could be on a world they helped us reach. Ultimately, confronting the reality of death in space is a sign of our maturity as a spacefaring civilization. It shows that we are moving beyond the initial romantic phase of exploration and into a more serious, sustainable era. These difficult conversations are necessary to ensure that we explore ethically and responsibly. By planning for the worst, we honor the courage of the astronauts who are willing to take these risks. It forces us to think about the value of human life and the sacrifices required to push the boundaries of our world. As we reach for the stars, we must also be prepared for the profound silence that awaits us there. What are your thoughts on this?